We welcome all the family and the friends and the people who are very important in the life of Norman. We're here to honor him as a man, give him our thanks and our respects and our acknowledgments. Give to him our commitment that all the kindnesses and all the things he ever did with us will not be lost upon our memory, that we'll always remember him for a blessing from this year and onward. Our dear Norman was the beloved husband of Judith, devoted father of Carrie and Rachel, cherished grandfather of Mariah and Dominic, the dearest brother of Susan, her husband Jeff, beloved son of the late Herbert and Judith Katz, loving uncle of Eric. Services today will be in our chapel, and then the interment will be in Zion Memorial Cemetery. I want to start with a selection from the Psalms, the familiar Psalm 23. I'll first say it in Hebrew, and then followed by the English, to which you're welcome to follow along. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo iksar, B'nai steshech yarbitzeni, al mei menuchos yenachaleni. Nafshi yishovev yancheni v'magli tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech b'gi tzalmaves, lo yirora ki ata imadi. Shiftecha umishantecha, hema yenachamuni. Tarach lefanai shulchan, neged soirai. Dishante v'shem roshi, kosi ravaya. Achtov v'chesed yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai. V'shavte v'beis Adonai, la'arech yamim. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in right paths for his name's sake. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff comfort me. Thou hast set before me a table in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I had a chance to know Norman in the sense of being the chaplain at the Ahuja Hospital. And the way that I saw him was a man who was very sick for a long time. And in the midst of his illness, he had a lot of people who cared a lot about him. He always had a lot of people by his bedside, a lot of people waiting on him and wanting him to get better. And I remember his face, seeing him briefly when he came out of this difficult illness. And he looked around and he smiled, and he saw all the relatives and all the friends who had come to see him. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be for so long that he would have those moments of clarity. But from what I came to learn, it wasn't just a little glimpse that I saw with him in the hospital with all these people around him. It was really his life. The theme of his life was that, yes, he had a lot of illness and he had a lot of hard times, but he always had people around him. And a lot of time when you give eulogies, you might talk about what a person did, where a person lived, what school they went to, their accomplishments. But in sharing the story of the life of Norman Katz, it's really about the people. The whole story of his life is about all the different people who he knew throughout the ages of his life. And so, if you permit me, that's how I will tell his story. The story through all the people who he knew, and all the people who cared for him. And this really is from the lens of his wife and his sister, who sat down with me and shared with me all of the beautiful people that he had in his life. First of all, we all know him as a family man. He was devoted to his wife, to his 2 daughters, his 2 grandchildren. He loved them all very much. And this connection to his family came from his childhood. He was born and bred in South Euclid, just off of Warrensville. He always had a deep connection with his mother, Judith. From his early years up until his adult years, she was his guidance. She was his mother in so many senses. And hardly a coincidence that she shared the same name with his wife later on. When she passed away at age 69, it was a very hard loss for him and for others. We could all see how much she did for them, what a huge role she was in their family. And in fact, in the last weeks of his life, he verbalized how much he missed her. He said out loud that he missed her so much and he just wanted to see her. And in fact, one of the comforts that the family gave him was they said, "Don't worry, Norman, you're going to see her one day soon. You're going to see her and Dad in the coming future. And that actually gave him a lot of comfort and joy to hear those words. And in fact, in the hospice, one of the things that he had in his room was a music therapist, a young lady who came and played songs on her instruments and with her voice. And the family was saying that this was amazing because it kind of took the family back to the time when Mom and Dad and Norman and the rest of the family would sit around and sing duets. That was a normal thing. The musical past that they had together, it was a whole cycle, a beautiful reconnection to that. He loved his mom very much. He loved his dad too. And they fought a lot, and they didn't always get along in the early years. But later on, as adults, they both respected and appreciated each other. As a kid, he often got into a lot of trouble. And I was just speaking with his aunt, who told me that she was his babysitter. And I said, what did you do? How did you handle him? And she basically didn't really answer my question, which means to say she still doesn't know after pondering all these years. She just says she bounced up and down on the bed with him quite a lot and just kept him busy and hoped and prayed that things wouldn't get any worse. But the funny thing, I think, with his childhood, it seems, was that he had a knack for getting himself into trouble, but he was very fortunate because he had a way of getting himself out of the trouble most of the time. And his family told the story that at Corky and Lenny's, that Susan and him would be saying all kinds of goofy things, which I can't go into, and that would, of course, make the parents really upset. But all that Norman had to do was kind of amp up the joke a little higher so that when his parents started to laugh and enjoy the very same jokes that they thought before was stupid, that he would be off the hook. And it worked beautifully. His parents went from being upset to laughing with him in his humor. He was always close to his sister, to Susan, and the two of them got through a lot of difficult life together. Throughout their lives as kids and as adults, they were always looking after each other. And even though they seemed to have different personalities and look at life a little bit differently, they seemed to always be together. They're always connected and helping each other out. And I know throughout his illnesses and his challenges, her guidance and her caring made a huge difference. But one of the most special people in his life that he was so fortunate to find was Judith, his dear wife. They met in high school, and I guess they were connected to each other through some roommates. And he was just a very lovable guy, and he was a lot of fun. They got married when Judy was 22, and he was 24. And they set out to have this family, and they had their vacations, and they had their serious days. They went to Put-in Bay, they went to Kalahari with the grandkids. They shared a lot of good times and a lot of challenges together. And Judith was saying, or Judy, I'm not sure how we call her, she was saying that the second date that they had together, it wasn't going out to the movies and it wasn't going out to dinner, but it was after that Norman had his cataract surgery. And that kind of started a theme, kind of a trend, where oftentimes he wouldn't feel well, he would need her help, and there she was to rescue him. She was his driver, she was his caregiver, she was his assistant, and she was his guide. And he sure had a lot of medical challenges. I can't keep track of all the things he had. He had the rare bone cancer, he had the femur removed and replaced, he was bedridden for more than 6 months. But I'm sure this wasn't easy on him, but I know many times he found a way to make the lemons into lemonade. I had heard that during the time that he knew he was going to be bedbound, he had to be in bed for more than 6 months while this huge gap in his femur would have to become reattached. And so what did he do? He said, I always wanted to get a master's degree in accounting. So he took on this great task while he was still in bed. And it sounds like the teachers at John Carroll were really into this idea. And a lot of them even came to his house and helped him with the teaching and the completion of the courses. And this was very hard for him, being in bed and being sick so often. He was a guy who loved to run and to do sports and to be active. But once again, I can't help but think of the stories of Judith or Judy always being there for him. He would go running with his buddies, and he would overdo it, and guess what he would do? He would pick up the call, and guess who would be his ride? She was always the driver, the person always taking care of him. And the thing that she was telling me is that oftentimes when he wasn't well, she would have to go get the car, tell him to wait at the door, and she would pick him up. And some people maybe didn't understand this. Why does your husband need so much pampering? Why does he need so much special attention? But she understood why. She knew how much he needed this, how much this extra TLC meant to him when he had so many challenges in his life. So the two of them made a nice family together. They raised their 2 kids, and they had a lot of special occasions. They had a very fun-filled Hanukkah with maybe the donuts and the candle lighting and the songs. And he would really enjoy this, lighting the candles with the kids and later with the grandkids, and going over to the family for the Passover Seder. He was the type of person who gave a lot to his kids. He gave them tons. He gave them more than perhaps he had inside of himself. But the good thing about his kids was that as much as everyone had lots of challenges in life, they just made him so pleased. He only saw the good things in them. He only saw the things that made him proud. He saw how much Rachel did so well in her job and how she really pushed herself and tried hard and gave it her all, and set her goals in life, and she kept them. He was very proud of his hard-working Rachel. And then, of course, saw those long nights that Carrie spent at the hospital. She was always sleeping over. She was always with him. Herself and Eddie and the kids, they were always there to keep Norman company, to make sure that he was happy. And Carrie said she didn't want him to wake up and see that no one was around. She didn't want him to be alone at night. So she made sure she was there with him and that he knew that she was with him at his side. Of course, his grandkids, Mariah and Dominic, were the lights of his life. And he loved to be hands-on with them, getting involved with them, and whatever he could do. He wanted to become the coach for Mariah. So whether it was her baseball last summer, or he was a step-in coach, or whether it was her basketball too. And Dominic had to go to medical appointments, he had to go to speech therapy, and things like that. But who was the one who knew exactly what the speech therapist was doing? Who knew all the ins and outs of the treatment? Who knew the therapist by their first name? Who knew what he needed to do at home? And that, of course, was Norman, who was so very involved in his grandkids' life. But once again, going back to his extended family, he just loved his family, as we can see in the family room. How many of you guys are out there? His extended family, his cousins, and his aunts, and his uncles. I was asked to mention in particular Rob, Dave, and Stevie, and of course their wives, who chose to be in this family, who are a very big part of their life. The five of them, Susan and Norman and the cousins. It was just an amazing gift that this family started out life together, and they grew to be children together and adults together as well. They lived so close. You guys just lived a few streets away in South Euclid and did almost everything together. And of course, Eric, his nephew, who was a man of not many words, but we all know how much you loved Norman, in your own unconditionally, in your own special, deep way. And it sounds like you guys had a unique understanding of each other that you couldn't even begin to explain to the rest of us. And you called him Uncle, not Uncle Norm, just Uncle, as a sign of how much you loved him so much. And just a few minutes ago, Eric was saying that he wasn't the type of guy that would go to all the courses in college. You go to the first course, you look at the syllabus, you show up for the final exam. Maybe Eric was one of those kind of people. But when it came to Norman's class, Norman's accounting class or whatever class it was, he made sure not to miss a single session. And he didn't miss the fact that Norman was a great teacher. He had a good sense of humor. He was witty. He was sincere and serious, but also funny. And you said, Eric, that was one of the motivations that you had for becoming, a college professor, a college teacher, is the way that you saw Norman teach in his classes. Lots of good friends helped this family through the special times. And there's many friends in this audience that I don't know your names, and I'm not able to mention who you are. But no doubt, this family got through all the difficult things because of many great people who helped out. So I feel bad singling out a few people, but if I may do so. So one of those people is Marlene, who was a friend of Susie and a friend of Norman. And as a nurse, she was very invaluable in helping the family to guide them through all the difficult twists and turns of the medical decisions and all the things that they had to go through in the hospital. And of course, many good friends in his life, in particular his students. His students in his classes meant a tremendous thing to him. And he just dreamed of being a college professor. And he knew that maybe, even though when he got to the point in his career where he wasn't necessarily going to be tenured, where he wasn't going to have tons of money, where this wasn't going to be some solid job that's going to make life so easy, he still went through with it because this is what meant everything to him, this job. And he taught accounting at Cuyahoga Community College, at Baldwin, at Kent, at Akron, as well as taking on some regular accounting jobs. And the students just loved him so much. The more he taught, the more he wanted to teach even more. And lastly, I just want to mention just his regular friends, his friends from school, his friends from the neighborhood, his friends from work. And one of the stories I heard was that one of his best childhood friends, someone named Steve, that he sat vigil at Ahuja for 10 days. He lives in Arizona, and he hadn't seen him in 7 years. But as soon as he heard the news that his buddy Norman from way back was ill, he got on an airplane, he came out to the hospital, and he would come every single day. He would come at 10 a.m., he would stay the entire day, and then repeat the process over and over again. He returned to Arizona, but his goal was to see through a good friend who helped him out in his own difficult times. And the words that he said to Norman were, "I'm here for you, buddy. I love you." So as I said in the beginning, the life of Norman Katz was a life of just people. We said a little bit about his accomplishments and things he did, but the main thing in his life were the people in his life that made such a difference. And I think that when you live a life of people, it's a two-way street. You build up a lot of people, and they build you. And thank goodness he had this gift where he built up people, and they built him up in turn. So I have the privilege of calling upon his cousin, Dave, for a few words.
Good afternoon, everybody. At past funerals, I would write something, and Normie would be the one to read it, mostly because I was too busy crying, so it will be tough delivering this myself. Normie was my cousin, as the rabbi said. However, our families were so close growing up that he was more like a brother. Better yet, one that I didn't have to share a bathroom with. He was always listening or playing music and doing funny things. When we were very young, I remember him organizing family football games in the attic bedroom of his Bayard Road home. The football was replaced by a rolled-up sock, and we only wore underwear, including Susie. I think the family should sue Professional Lingerie Football for stealing Normie's original idea. We stayed close in adulthood. I always looked forward to talking with him on the phone, but especially seeing him in person. He was animated, funny as can be, and had a great infectious laugh. While most saw him as the life of the party, I'm not sure if outsiders knew about Normie's compassionate and supportive side. My first memory of that was when Grandma Evelyn passed away Thanksgiving Day, 1969. Excuse me. Susie left the house crying and found Normie outside. Normie engulfed Susie with a hug I'll always remember. Normie, there's so much about you that I will miss, including our inside jokes. I will hold memories of you dear and try to keep some of your qualities alive. The last thing you said to me in the hospital was, "I love you, David." Well, I love you, Normie. May you rest in peace with Aunt Judy, Uncle Herbie, Grandma, and Grandpa.
So we just want to thank Dave for his special words. And I know we said it earlier before, but I just want to stress once again just how important his children were to him, with Rachel and Carrie. And we told earlier the story, just how Carrie and Eddie and the kids came, and they stayed with him at nighttime, and they made sure that he was comfortable, and they didn't want to leave him alone. And they wanted to make sure that in the morning time that he had someone who he knew, someone who he loved, waiting there for him when he woke up. So he's a very lucky man to have such a loving wife and sister and children and grandchildren and extended family. It's not a coincidence that of all the days for this funeral, that occurs on a special day in the Jewish calendar. Today is known as Rosh Chodesh. It's the first day of the new month. But this is not just any month, but this is the month of Elul. And the month of Elul in Hebrew acronyms stands for Ani Ladodi V'Ladodi Li. It's a time of closeness between God and his people. Why this special closeness? Is that Rosh Hashanah is only 30 days away, the new year. A time where we start over again and we revisit who we are and what we want to do. And God's approach is not that he should scare us and he should discipline us or tell us what we need to work on, but God just comes close to us so we can feel his presence during this time in advance of the high holy days. And as such, because it's a happy day, it's a day of Rosh Chodesh, that a lot of the mourning aspects of the Jewish funeral service are removed. We don't say the El Mali Rachamim memorial prayer. We don't stop the 7 times before we go to the cemetery. And other serious forms of mourning are actually restricted because of this nature. And I don't know if it always works out like this, but it always somehow works out when you have a person whose life is a funny life and a happy life, a life of bringing joy to people. Somehow coincidentally, very often, the date of their funeral is a Rosh Chodesh or a holiday or something like that, where the tradition backs them up. You got to laugh, you got to be happy, you got to smile. You got to be sincere, you got to be serious, you got to think about where you're going, where you came from. But sometimes you can't be too serious. You have to look on the bright side. Look to the happy things. Look to be strong and look to be positive. And I'm sure that would have been his message for us. And he would have been quite pleased at the coincidence of this funeral service, falling out on a happier day, on the day of Rosh Chodesh. Following today's chapel service, we're going to be having the interment at the Zion Memorial Cemetery, which is located at the corner of Rockside and Northfield Road. And that following the burial service, the family will receive friends at the residence of Susan and Jeff Ridenour. That's 9442 Bainbridge Road in Chagrin Falls, following the interment until 8 p.m. just today, Wednesday. And in lieu of flowers, the contributions are not required, but if one decides to do so, they're suggested to Montefiore Hospice or to the Seidman Cancer Center, care of University Hospitals. I wanted to close with what I think of as a beautiful thing, a beautiful reading, entitled To Those I Love and Those Who Love Me. It was written by a person whose life was short. They didn't have a lot of time to go. And they wanted to leave a message of strength and positivity and appreciation to their family. And I know Norman wasn't able to express himself in the last few weeks or days of his life, but perhaps he would have said something like this. These would have been his thoughts. When I am gone, release me, let me go. I have so many things to see and to do. You mustn't tie yourself to me with tears. Be happy that we had precious years. I gave you my love, you can only guess how much you gave to me in happiness. I thank you for the love you each have shown, but now it's time I traveled on alone. So grieve a while for me, if grieve you must, then let your grief be comforted by trust. It's only for a while that we must part, so bless the memories within your heart. I won't be far away, for life goes on, so if you need me, call, and I will come. Though you can't see or touch me, I'll be near, all of my love around you, soft and clear. And when you must come this way alone, I'll greet you with a smile and say, welcome home. This concludes our service in the chapel. We're going to ask people to please stand, and we're going to have the pallbearers come forward to help in escorting the casket. The Jewish custom is that the pallbearers will come forward, 6 of them. I think we're still awaiting volunteers, and they will guide the casket out of the chapel through the back, and then the family will follow in behind the casket, and then the rest of us will follow in behind. And then we're going to go in procession to the cemetery, to Zion Memorial Cemetery. So we'll give the family a minute or two, just get their stuff settled, and as soon as they are, we will begin the procession out of the chapel.